Hey folks, and welcome to MLR Kickoff. We have an absolute bumper show for you today. The Commissioner, the big dog, George Killebrew, he's going to stop by a little later to sit down with our very own Professor Pete Steinberg. And if there's one man I love more than George Killebrew, it's Rad Tucker, the Seattle Seawolf. He'll join us in studio as well a little later. And then the Professor, as always. You've gone attack, you've gone defense. Now we're going deep into the transition. The Professor's lab, he's going to pull back the curtain and make the most confusing part of rugby less confusing. Pete, speaking of transitions, let's talk a little bit of your life right now. Different week, different hotel room, same hotel. We're trying to figure out if you're
back in Chicago, Dan. Back in Chicago, same hotel. Different room, as you'll see, talk to the commissioner from the wonderful United Club in O'Hare, in the B concourse. So thanks to the United Club and their great internet. But yeah, on the road again. But Dan, like as a Kansas City native, how are you feeling today? You feeling pretty good after the
exhausted
football win?
Exhausted. I love the, and sorry, I know our commissioner's in Dallas and not to offend George, but I love the stat that came out that Patrick Mahomes was able to drive pretty much the length of the field, kick a field goal to tie it in 13 seconds, where Dak Prescott took 14 seconds to run 25 yards and then not spike the ball to have a shot to win the game. But sorry, Cowboys fans, next year. There's always next year. The Chiefs, though, they stay alive. Exciting stuff.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, I don't watch a lot of football. I used to watch a lot, just don't have time now. But, it's a playoff game, so I'm watching it. And, great game, comes down, Buffalo score. They go up 13 seconds to go. I'm like, this game's over. Time to go up and put the kids down. Go up, give Penelope the story, tell her the story, get her down, come down. And as I come down, I see the Chiefs celebrating. And I'm like, what happened? Like, how could the Chiefs be celebrating? So I probably missed like the most, I like they said, like the last minute, like the most exciting last minute of NFL playoff history. I saw the first 47 seconds of it, but not the last 13 seconds, and missed the overtime. So, Penelope will hear that story for years.
Listen, we're not the NFL kickoff, but we'll give it a little time. It is the biggest sport in this market. But Josh Allen was the best quarterback on the field on Sunday night, and I felt bad for Buffalo and Josh Allen and the Bills fans. But, the final score is the final score, and the Chiefs continue on. And, let's hope that we can have a weekend like that in Major League Rugby to kick off in a few weeks, Pete.
Yeah, and let's take it back to rugby and give a shout-out to Emily Bidwell, who in her first tournament as the US Women's Sevens head coach managed to pull off the win in Malaga, had some great performances, in that final against Russia was a really great performance. So lots of good stuff happening over there with the women's sevens, and it's great to have a women head coach on the circuit. Now,
would she be on your coaching tree?
She would be on my coaching tree. Yeah, she would be on my coaching tree.
Another branch in the Steinberg tree. It's getting
Emily
quite full.
Emily has this great story where I secretly made her vice captain of the Eagles. She claims I didn't tell anyone else. I can't remember if I told anyone else, but I just started treating her like the vice captain. So she was a wonderful center and a great player. Made her the vice captain. Didn't tell anyone, but started treating her as such. And she never told me at the time. She told me a few years later. I think once she had retired. But that's a funny story to tell about a coach. So she's got a good one on me.
Yeah, there you go. Good stuff. And then they're off to Spain now, right?
Well, yeah. So in staying in Spain,
Seville. They're headed to Seville.
They're off to Seville. So they're in Malaga, off to Seville. Lots of issues for both the men and the women. Women's tournaments in terms of COVID. So Fiji aren't there, New Zealand aren't there, but still a great showing for the US women, and the US men showed a lot of potential as well. Maybe didn't put it together, but a lot more turnover on the men's side. In fact, we're going to see a lot of those US men's Olympians in MLR this coming year. So that's one of the really exciting things about
that. Could be something to jump into on another show, just the transition from 7s to 15s. Because we will, in particular down in Houston, right? We saw Marty Yosefo get his first run out with the Seawolves. In Houston, they had a little bit of a hybrid session down there against the Jackals, so we haven't had a really good chance. Actually, I don't think Danny Barrett's down there yet. I think he's expecting a child, so he's hanging out with the beautiful bride to wait for their baby to come along before he heads to Houston. But that's actually going to be a fun thing to watch, to see how that transition goes. But speaking of transitions, we're going to be a transition-heavy show, Pete, I think. Let's jump over. Let's go and bring in the big dog. You had a chance to sit down with him, George Killebrew. It feels like it's been longer than 2 years, but it is pretty much 2 years since he signed on the dotted line and joined Major League Rugby. And it's been a good 2 years. You've thanked United Airlines, but let's thank American Airlines as well, who are proud sponsors of the league. Nice one, Pete. Yeah, I wonder who will be the professor next week when they find this one out. But let's bring him in, George Killebrew, the Commissioner of Major League Rugby.
Well, George, thank you so much for joining MLR Kickoff.
Yes, sir, Pete. Always a pleasure. What's going on?
Well, we're here to talk about the lost season, the 2020 season, which was a bit of a roller coaster. You just came on as commissioner and the COVID pandemic hit. Can you talk a little bit about what those first few weeks of the season were and then kind of what led to the cancellation for the rest of it?
Yeah, most people want to talk about last season, and you guys want to talk about the lost season. You were trying to make progress here, but I'm happy to play ball with you. So sure, as we hearken back to 2020, the news started to break about this outbreak called COVID. We were in week 5, if you recall, sailing along pretty well. And then, really, I was very fortunate to be able to get the intel that the NBA has just through my contacts there. And so I was getting intel from other different sources, but when I went to people like the head trainer at the Mavericks and Mark Cuban weighed in for me, and I said, here's what we're thinking about doing. We're thinking about hitting pause after week 5. What do you think? And they all said, the intel we're getting says you're making the right decision.
Yeah, and it's funny to think that that was 2 years ago. In some ways, it feels like last year. In other ways, it feels like 5 years ago. That's what COVID has done. But I think one of the interesting things that we would like to kind of dive into is that you have this cancellation, but the league is so young. There was concerns that the league might go away, right? So how did you keep the focus of both the league office and the teams during that time when there wasn't any rugby?
Well, honestly, we turned it into a positive that would benefit us. And really how we did that, we did it in a lot of ways, but 2 very particular ways. One, our board of directors, our board of governors, and our owners voted to pay the players as if we'd played an entire season. So paying them as if we'd gotten all the way through the finals. And that had really huge effects, especially on some of the international players that had taken a risk and come over here to see what MLR was all about. And they were able to kind of go back to their home country and tell the guys they played with through their career that they were treated properly, by Major League Rugby. And that was a really watershed moment for us because we got a lot of feedback from a lot of people saying, wow, you guys really did the right thing by taking care of these players. And then which led into really the second benefit. And the second benefit was we literally had a year from the day we shut down to the day we reopened to work on the business of rugby. And this league had never had that kind of time to spend the time working on grassroots rugby, ticket sales, sponsorship. And I understand we are under kind of this umbrella of COVID, which did make it easy, but it gave our teams and our league office literally a year to prepare for the upcoming season, which was very needed in our case. And, I read all the same kind of message boards that you did, Pete, about people wondering whether we were going to make it. And that was really never part of the discussion. 80% of our league budget goes to our players. It goes to our players' salaries. It goes to their insurance. It goes to their living accommodations and everything. So that's where the real money in this league is and where it goes. So, we feel pretty good, or we felt pretty good back then that given a year to get ready for last season, that we would use the time wisely and we'd come back stronger.
So let's talk a little bit about like the business of the league, because like you said, you came back stronger. The league came back with American Airlines, Guaranteed Rate, and Geico. These are household names as league sponsors coming out of a canceled season. Was it easy to get those guys on board after 2020, or was there an eagerness to be involved in something that was so new and exciting?
Yeah, nothing's easy, as you guys know. I wish I had a great example of something that was easy. No, you know, I think it's a combination of things. Like, I think that, you know, prior to that, we had never had a cash-paying sponsor in this league. You know,
right.
we were able to, you know, do some VIK deals, and we were important. I mean, don't get me wrong, but we were never going to survive and thrive until we started doing business with the biggest names and biggest brands in sports. And, you know, it really started with American Airlines. They were a company that we knew very well, being based here in Dallas, where I'm based, and I had a pretty long history with them. Our chief commercial officer had a long history with them, and we kind of knew what they were about and what's in their DNA and what's important to them. And we knew what we were about and what's important to us. We were able to, you know, come to a relationship that was really more than just a traditional sponsorship. And then when we announced that, it was kind of the domino effect. Some of these other Fortune 500 brands that we were talking to, like the two aforementioned, you know, Guaranteed Rate and Geico, they very quickly thereafter joined as well. So, you know, it was the beginning of a pathway that got even better, you know, last season, where we ended the season with 10 cash-paying sponsors. And, you know, are we getting, you know, the type of revenue from those that we really want? Ultimately, no, but you have to start somewhere, right? And you're able to do some really important deals with some really important companies. And our messaging was very simple. It's like, jump on with us, grow with us, and let us prove to you that we are a good entity to be involved with. And then over time, we hope we can raise your investment in what we're doing. And that's exactly what occurred.
So there were two big things that were in this like never-ending off-season of 2020 that were launched by the league. So one was like really exciting, and it was the MLR Collegiate Draft. And then the second one, and this goes to your comment about no one having time, but suddenly there was time for the teams to really invest in the grassroots, and the league launch their grassroots development initiatives. Can you talk about both of those and how important they will be as foundations of the league moving forward?
Yes, absolutely. You know, the glaring hole when I first got here was there was no pathway, or the completion of the pathway from youth to academy, to collegiate, to professional. We were missing that collegiate draft, that pathway to join MLR, if you indeed choose. So, and that was already on the drawing board when I got here. It just wasn't in existence. And, you know, I just wanted to make sure that our rugby experts were able to say to me that if we have a collegiate draft and we make 24 selections, which would be 2 rounds of 12 selections, that we'll have more than 24 athletes register for our draft. You know, I wanted to make sure that you know, we weren't kidding ourselves. And I was assured that in the collegiate game, we were very healthy, and we would have way more than 24 register. So I said, let's do it. Obviously, we weren't doing it in the best kind of way because of COVID. We weren't able to do it like the NFL does it, or the NBA, which is very dramatic, and people are crying, and moms are hugging their sons, and announcers are crying, and commissioners are getting booed, and, you know, the traditional fun of a collegiate draft. But we had over 400 collegiate senior rugby players register for our inaugural draft, and we made those 24 selections. It'll be a monumental thing to look back on a bunch of years from now when we uttered the phrase, you know, with the first selection in the inaugural Major League Rugby collegiate draft, the Dallas Jackals select Connor Mooneyham with the #1 pick. You know,
and that's and it's funny because we've spoken to Connor on the show, and he's talked about how like he was crying and dancing and hugging his family. It was just happening at home. And I think that like it was obviously a very big impactful moment for him. And I think it has been. And I think there were questions from the community, George, about the draft and whether it was too early. But I think, here we are in 2022. And I think everyone sees it as something to look forward to in the off season, which I think is really what we want as fans.
Well, no, you're exactly right. And we all know the drama that North America loves around the draft process. I mean, it's really must-see TV. Whether you're necessarily a fan of that sport, it really doesn't matter, because you're watching, the culmination of 18 to 20 years of hard work by an individual athlete come to fruition on the biggest stage. Whether it be the MLR stage or the NFL stage, it really doesn't matter, because that drama and that hard work and that moment is really a powerful moment for sports fans, and it's really a powerful moment for the athletes. They deserve that stage, and we completed the pathway from youth to academy to collegiate to professional. And so it was really important, really impactful. I know we're not here to talk about year 2 of the draft. We did it even a little bit better. And then next year, it's going to get, I think we went like C+ to maybe a B. We're shooting, A- for year 3, if not higher. So we're looking forward.
Well, what I would say in year 2 is that, you could see circulating on social media mock drafts. Like, people were coming up with mock drafts in year 2. Like, that's like the engagement is just going to grow. And you've talked about this concept of a pathway. And the other thing in the off season in 2020 was this Grassroots initiative. All of a sudden, teams finally had the resources, both players, right, that were still there, and coaches, where they could really go out and engage in their community. Can you talk about how the league incented the teams to do that and why that was important?
Yeah, I mean, time was the essence, because if you look back at the way it used to be, was, we would finish sometime around July the 1st. Well, that's too late to start going, in the local communities, to the rec centers and all these other entities that have broken for the summer. So we had the time, as we talked about, we had a year to really work on these things, which are things that our teams want to do on the grassroots level. That's the most fun part about this game, is to get out and teach the game. But we put a little kind of cherry on top of that by incentivizing the teams that we're gonna rate you, which we do with our teams in a lot of different methods. But we're going to rate you and rank you on how you did in these efforts. And if you did really well, you're going to be able to earn extra salary cap. Which is what everyone wants. And so we were able to throw that carrot on top, and everyone took as much advantage as they could. But it was a bit unfair, too, because in certain parts of the country where you were really hard closed, right? California, New York, and states like that, they were shut down. Places like Texas, they were like, oh, maybe we'll allow certain things. So we had to take all things into consideration. All the teams want to do this. It's not like we have to put this incentive over the top, but a little healthy competition never hurts anyone. And that really took this to another level. And our grassroots development initiatives will be something that we continue on because it's really at the core of what we're doing. We've got to grow the amount of people playing this sport in North America.
Yeah, and I think that's important. We have to grow the number of people that play, because the more people play, the more fans there are, right? And the grassroots initiatives get parents involved. It's just a great marketing opportunity. It's great the teams will be able to do that. All right, so enough of the ancient history of 2020. Let's talk about the relatively recent history of 2021. Coming into that season, right, we were still in the pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about the decision that Toronto made, where they realized they weren't going to be able to play? I mean, did you expect them to say, hey, we're going to come and live south of the border for like 5 months? Like, talk a little bit about their decision in 2021.
Yeah, there are a lot of stories similar to that, but that one is really at the top. The word I used a lot was heroic. I thought it was a heroic decision for them to pack up their entire rugby operation, players, staff, trainers, everybody, and leave their country and come into the United States, and luckily Atlanta was a willing host, and to share their facility and to try to make a go of it. I would have fully respected had they called and said, I think it's just in our best interest to sit this year out. And that's totally understandable, because not to have any home games it's just we were asking a lot for the Toronto Arrows to compete, but they did. And it was a rough go, and we had other teams that had rough goes of it, that had to leave their state to try to get the competition in. But it kind of goes to the DNA of these teams and these owners in this sport. They were not going to be deterred. The easy way out would have been, hey, let's take a step back and we'll rejoin, once the pandemic lifts. That would have been an easy decision and understandable in certain cases. But, Toronto's decision to do what they did was heroic. I don't think that's overstating that word. And they did the best they could under a tough circumstance. And luckily, we feel like they're going to be fully operational as we enter this coming season.
Yeah, I remember, George, we talked to you in last year, right before the season started. You say, hey, we want to be 99-0. And then we talked to you at the final and you said, hey, we were 99-0, right? And that takes a lot of commitment from the league, from all the owners and from the players to make that work. I think there was one game that was moved one day, I think, in all of that. And that may be a record for a professional league in the US. I'm not sure that anyone else, maybe the teams that went in bubbles, right, in one location were able to pull that off. So that was remarkable. And, the league has survived. I think that was a genuine concern, at least for those of us on the outside. So can you talk a little bit about what you're looking forward to? And I know we've done the ancient history, we've done the recent history. Let's do the present. What's really exciting for you in the upcoming season?
Well, anytime you're a part of a challenger league and, you're entering year 5 now, which is really hard to believe. And you're able to tell the growth story that, the pioneers that started this league, we call them the original 7, 5 years ago. It went from 7 to 9 teams to 12 teams in the competition last year to a 13th team, coming in this year. And, when you look at kind of the history of professional sports, that in alone is a really amazing thing. And that's the credit goes to these ownership groups because, it's been tough, especially the last couple of years. And, not only have we survived, we've thrived as far as our numbers. And so, looking forward, having a 13th team is exciting. Having the buzz around a possible World Cup in 2031 coming to the United States and North America is a really good North Star for us to look at, as we enter this year. If you think about it, if we were to add 1 or 2 teams on this pathway to a 2031 World Cup in our country, we'd be a 32-team league or so when the World Cup hits the American shores. And so, there's so much to be positive about. And I really admire the work the teams have done. We've really tried to focus on not only being a great rugby product, but being a great entertainment product. And then that means you have to have something for everyone. You can't just have great rugby and call it a day. You have to be a great entertainment option in your city. And we spent a lot of time with that. We brought all the league's salespeople and marketing people to Dallas. We had over 50 bodies here on a 2-day retreat recently talking about just the fundamentals of running a sports franchise, from ticket sales to local sponsorship sales to local marketing to local broadcast agreements to community relation activities in your market, and how to be great at it, because it really is the combination of all that that's going to really take this league to another level. So I'm excited to see the progress we've made there at our team level as we kick it off here very soon, next couple weeks, and having a full slate of teams and a really robust broadcast agreement that we're going to be announcing here shortly with one very dialed-in partner, rather than sharing it as we've done in the past. The third year of the Rugby Network is the next generation, I should say. We've been working on the Rugby Network for 3 years, but the progress we made there from having a goal of 25,000 subscribers in year 1 and really eclipsing way north of 50 by the time we were done. It's really fun to see kind of the momentum that we're carrying into this season.
Well, George, it sounds like those of us that can head out to a rugby game this year are going to be getting a great game, which I think MLR has always delivered every year. It's always been exciting rugby, but also a great experience. And we hope the people that are watching or listening that are new to rugby, head on out. And George, thank you so much for your continued leadership of the league, and thank you so much for your time today.
No problem, Pete. Good to see you.
There you go, Pete. And we talked about American Airlines, kind of being, the segue to other companies getting on. 10 cash-paying sponsors coming into the league for 2022. Definitely trending in the direction that we want it to be trending in terms of the business side of operations for MLR.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think George and his team has really, obviously used their connections to be able to build some of that base. But what we really need is we need to grow the number of eyeballs that are watching MLR, right? So the more eyeballs that watch MLR, the more a sponsor will pay. But getting them in the door early, and even even if it's a small amount of cash, that can grow as the league grows. So I think they've really done a great job. And I loved hearing, Dan, about the sharing of best practice they did on the marketing, sales, and operations side, where the league brought together 50 people from all the teams and talked about, how do you run these programs really well, these clubs? How do you share best practice? I think really important. How do you make the experience of the fan beyond the game? Right? I think that's one of the things we're trying to do here with MLR Kickoff now, is we're trying to make the game more accessible. We want it to be something that people want to come to and not be intimidated, because the game can be a little complex. It can be a little bit difficult, but if the experience is fun and we think we just think the game is fun, the experience fun is the game is fun. You don't have to understand everything to want to come back.
Don't forget Deputy Commissioner Bill Gorham worked for the Houston Astros. If there's any organization that's good at stealing best practices or signs, it's the Astros. So we have a good one in there. And Bill, just kidding, Bill. I know he's a big fan of the show. I love you, buddy.
He's like in a like there's George, but Bill's like in. You want to talk about me losing my job because of American Airlines? Like, Bill's in our stack. Yeah, he's in our management stack here, Dan.
Yeah.
Come on. Don't piss off the boss's boss or whatever Bill is.
I had a great time at the final last year with Bill. We went to the airport together, and then I spoke to James Patterson the next day. He goes, "I'm just having breakfast with Bill Gorham." I'm like, "No, you're not. I went to the airport with him last night at like midnight." And sure enough, Bill's flight got cancelled and went back. I said, "Did you actually have a flight?" And he goes, "No, I just enjoy hanging out with you, Dan. So I thought I'd catch the shuttle all the way to LAX and caught a cab back to the hotel," which is not true. His flight did get cancelled, but he made me feel really good about myself. Speaking of feeling good about myself, there is one player that has always made me feel good about myself, and I am so happy that we got to talk to him early in the season here. Let's bring him into the show now. It's the big bad number 6, 7, 8, 4, or 5, depending on what week it is. The Player of the Year, 2019 MLR champion, Rad Tucker. Well, Christmas is December 25th, but consider this a late present for me, folks. Christmas has come in January for me. Rad Tucker, wrapped in a package under the tree for the Panther Dan Power. Mr. Tucker, it's been too long, buddy. How are you doing?
Mr. Panther, good to hear from you. It's been a while. I hope you and the family had a great Christmas and are trucking well. You're looking healthy. I'd love to see it.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, fighting fit, ready to go. Well, let's talk a little family first, because big news coming out of New York. Little Big Tucker is coming over now. The little but bigger William Tucker makes his way to New York. Talk us through that. With obviously some influence there. You've talked him into it, or he just wanted to avoid you by going even further away to the East Coast from the West Coast?
Nah, little Will's come over. Obviously, I think he's just looking for a challenge. Had a Mitre 10 Cup and whatnot. He's battled a few injury problems, and was unfortunate not to get a super crack, and then was looking for some footy, and thankfully, New York came calling, and he's fizzed to get over here and give it a crack. Mind you, he reckons it's pretty cold over there in New York, something we're not quite used to in New Zealand.
Yeah, well, you were saying off air before we started that if he thought he cried a lot in the backyard when you were kids, wait until you play New York this year. I'm going to show him the meaning of pain and who the real talent in the Tucker family is. Is that something that you feel that you can actually execute on now, considering how fragile your body's been for the last 2 years?
Oh, I think there's no doubt that that mum got all the talent in the family, but we do what we can. Hopefully, Will keeps his mouth shut I've been rumored to have a bit of a lippy mouth on me, but, as long as he keeps that to himself, we'll be all right.
Mate, beautiful stuff. And obviously, all in jest, it's great to have your brother over here. You've great family, the Tucker family. We're excited to see you two get to bump heads this year. Mate, let's go back. Let's talk a little history in your history in MLR. It's a pretty decorated one. You came over in 2019, year 2, Seattle, defending champions going into that year. And I know, obviously, as a new player to a franchise, there's always pressure to perform, but more so for you coming into the defending champs. What do you remember about that preseason in 19 and stepping into MLR in Seattle for the first time?
I think obviously coming in, it's always a big thing coming in when a team's just won something. There's huge expectation for the team to come in and win, especially coming in as a foreign player. The league was very fresh. There was a number of us that came in, and that made it a lot easier. The team did a good job. We all stayed together and got to learn America, got to learn Seattle together and grow that way. And I think that helped a lot of us gel. JP Smith, back then we had Stefan Coetzee, and all the Canadian guys we were all staying in one big place, and it helped us grow as a unit. And thankfully we had a strong season. A lot of those guys, we played a lot of minutes together, and the team already had a great culture, and it meant that we could form a culture around each other and then add that to the group. And I think, it helped the team. Well, I hope we helped the team obviously achieve what the team set out to do. Coming out of New Zealand, it was obviously, I'd be lying if it wasn't a big change to what I'd been used to. But, a lot's changed in that time, but it was definitely, and the team had, issues with visas and new coaches coming over. So there was a lot of challenges in that first year, but I think it really brought the team together, and obviously the results speak for themselves in the end.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the final. Let's talk about the whole run into the off-season there. You played Toronto at home in the semi-final. Tight game. Always felt like you guys were in control. Is it always, and you've played in a lot of big games, so for people new to rugby, there's always that risk of looking a game ahead, and I think everyone's always dealt with it in their career. Do you remember much leading to that week in Toronto? A dangerous team, you had them at home, but there was always that eye, hey, we're going back to the big dance here in San Diego again.
I think we thankfully actually got our pants pulled down by Toronto in Toronto that season. We travelled up there. Yeah. And we got absolutely spanked. So, and we also had drawn with Utah the week before, I think, or 2 weeks earlier. So we were actually in not a rut, but we weren't playing our best footy, and we knew Toronto was going to be a massive test. So we sort of, I guess everyone says the semi was our final that day. We knew that if we played like we did against Toronto, a game would get spanked. I think I'm remembering correctly. The boys came out firing, and then we showed up on defense to finish the game off. So, it was a big week, but definitely, I think we had to settle to score. Toronto was our attitude going into that game.
Yeah, I do remember that last round against Utah with the draw. I almost felt as though Utah had kind of exposed a few chinks in the Seattle armor with the kicking game. Obviously, Matt Turner was in his prime back then at fullback, but not a strong kicker of the ball. Great ball runner, creative player. Utah kicked to the corners really effectively and turned that back three around and defended well and put you guys under an immense amount of pressure. But yeah, Toronto, I did forget that I gave you guys a really tough run up there in Toronto. So let's go final now. San Diego, heavy favourites at home, like heavy favourites. I think everyone felt that lightning struck year one for Seattle against Glendale. It wasn't going to strike twice. It took you guys 80-plus minutes to get that lightning back in the bottle, but it happened. What do you remember of that big day?
I was excited, to be honest. Honestly, personally, I'm always one that I don't dwell on losses, but I always remember losses. And San Diego had tipped us up twice again going into the game. I think that had a great season, and it was almost a bit of an underdog mentality that we took in. But, with lots of sports, especially with rugby, it can come down to the last minute, and, a few things go your way. And the boys, to their credit, we had a lot of help from the guys who came off the bench in that game, and we really finished strongly. got ourselves back into the game and saw a situation where anything could happen in the last 5 minutes. And, it took longer than 5 minutes and took old ex-Seawolves player, legendary goal kicker Brock Staller to take his head taken off to win us a penalty and kick it in the corner. And we knew we backed our maul. we backed our kicking game. We backed our maul. We scored a few tries off lineouts in that game, and then obviously culminating in the last try, which I guess got the job done in the end.
Yeah. Hey, I'm gonna Kanye. You're here. You're Taylor Swift. I'm Kanye. I'm going to let you have your moment when you can talk us through that try. But I want to rewind just a touch. Joe Peterson kicks a field goal, puts them up. What did you guys say on the way back to halfway? In hindsight, right? Sport's an easy game to play in hindsight. It was probably the wrong call to kick a field goal. Territory, keep the pressure down that end of the field. They'd probably hold on and win that game. He kicks it. But what do you guys say on the way back to halfway?
Look, mate, I started celebrating when he kicked that field goal because we had a chance. I knew we had a game plan off kickoffs to plug it deep and put them under pressure, and whether that be from a turnover or them kicking it, which they ended up kicking. But for me, it was like, fire the lads up. We've got a chance here, 3 big minutes or 2 big minutes, whatever it was. We just got to score a try to win the game. So I actually, poor old Skip Ricky, I don't know what he was saying, but I was screaming at everyone that we were on here, lads. So that was a lot of the chat. And I think, guys started saying that, and the energy immediately just picked up as we jogged back to halfway. Everyone reared after that kickoff, and, they were like, well, obviously we should get out of our own 22. And again, as I said, back the line out, and hopefully something good happens after that.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it up there with Matt Dunning's field goal for the Waratahs down by 4 and kicking the field goal, but you could see the difference. Normally in a big game moment like that, San Diego are celebrating. They were very placid after that field goal. There wasn't a lot of the crowd went nuts, but San Diego, the Legion, they were kind of a little like, ooh, was that the right thing to do? And all right, now we fast forward. Brock Staller gets decapitated. You get a penalty, go to the corner. What's the line-out call? I hope you've changed the call so you're not giving anything away for the 2022 season. What's the line-out call? What's the communication like between was Coetzee still on then at hooker?
No, Dan Treeweiler had come on.
Treeweiler, that's right. Yep. So what's the chat? The pack, you were doing lineouts, or was Ricart doing lineouts that day?
Rick was calling lineouts, but I think, at that stage, we were throwing them, most of them was going to him or me, so it wasn't rocket science. But we knew Dan had a good seed. And we knew San Diego would probably try and defend them all. So Rick stuck one up on himself. Funnily enough, I was actually his back lifter and kind of done my job too well because I got spat out of that maul pretty quickly and latched back on the end and, managed to get the ball in my hands and the backs came flying in. I had to make sure Shalom Samuela didn't get his hands on it because he probably would have dropped it or something. So it was a bit of panic stations for me when I saw them coming in ahead of me because I fell over and got up and ran around. The next minute I see Shalom near the ball and I was like, oh, he doesn't know what to do in there. Just made sure I latched on and got it in my hands and then put the head down and charged the legs and the boys did the rest.
Lomu would be the only player who could miss a tackle while he actually has the ball too. That's how bad his defense was.
Well, he loved a little shoulder charge, but, if you run straight at him, he'll get you. But
yeah, ladder. So what's the line-out call? What's the call?
Just a middle line-out. I couldn't even tell you what the calls were from.
You don't even remember. They changed. They've evolved that much. You know how it's like you'd sit there and it was the Chiefs win the Super Bowl over the 49ers, Tyree Hill, the downhill play. It's Wasp. Like, that's the call. And they kind of talk through, hey, we called Wasp. And they're like, you sure you want to do this? And he's like, yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to run it. Like, not that sort of moment, that Hollywood kind of moment where we're like, remember Any Given Sunday? Where he's like, Comanche.
Yeah, I do.
And he's Great like, film. Comanche.
Oh, we knew we were mauling. So I guess it was just a maul call. I don't even remember what that was then. Stones,
make
maybe.
It up, Brad. We can just edit Stones. There it is.
I think it might have been Stones for Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
so get the roll on, and then was it Ricky? You know, he speaks in Afrikaans, so I just remember the lineouts week to week to make sure I don't forget anything or hear the wrong words. So it's all right.
I had a South African math teacher in the 8th grade, and I couldn't understand him the whole year. I ended up with a C in math, and my dad finally met him at the parent-teacher interview, and he goes, "I actually don't hold you responsible. I didn't understand a word he said that whole 40 minutes." So I feel your pain with Ricky there as well. All right, now the fun part. Full-time whistle goes pandemonium, right? Everything's fun. Give me 2 hours, though, after the whistle. You've gone, changed, showered, eaten, night out after a championship win. How was it?
Yeah. Probably just as you can imagine. Just, I don't know where moe came from. Somehow there was moe on the field. So I just remember being drenched in that and sticky as hell. And then obviously buffing whatever was left in that bottle with JP, and then went into the shed. And actually, funnily enough, Dan Treadwell is a bit of a character, and he'd bought some awful bottle of whiskey with him. So that's always floating around the changing room. It's fair to say the shackles got broken pretty quickly, mate, and the boys were just full bore ahead. We got back to the hotel, and I don't think we were very welcome there in a hurry, so we just went to some bar in San Diego. I do remember we stopped and got some big stogies, though, so we thought we were pretty cool, and we were just sitting outside having a beer with the old Michael Jordan cigar in hand, so it wasn't bad.
Joe Burrow before Joe Burrows. I love it. All right. Little did we know that the dark clouds were forming in the background. COVID 2020 was coming. We have this crescendo of 2019, a great championship. Momentum comes in. We get a new commissioner in George Killebrew. Everything's kind of pushing in the right direction. Then bam, shut it down. 2020 was not a great start for you guys. There was some coaching issues. You said visa issues. The league sort of took a leap in terms of players coming in. Seattle was pretty consistent with their roster. How did you handle that personally in terms of going into 2020 and then the shutdown, COVID, everything? For a rugby player, it's probably once in a lifetime situation to be stuck in, and for you in particular in another country.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, firstly from a team side of thing, we did have a number of new guys come in. We played 2-3 preseason games, and it felt like all of our new foreigners fell over in the first week. It was really unfortunate timing. Big Ross Neal moved over, and I think he broke his hand. And we got another winger and a fullback, and they both got injured. And 1 minute you've gone from having this team that everyone's excited about to a lot of injuries and a lot of guys that probably hadn't had a lot of time in during the preseason because the foreigners come in late. So it was very challenging from a rugby point of view. But I don't think we were confident that things were going to turn around that season. Then obviously stuff got shut down, and it all, as you know, escalated pretty quickly. I sort of had New Zealand pretty quickly put up some stuff on their borders, and I was like, well, down the line here, there's if I can play some consistent rugby, there's an opportunity to represent the Eagles and potentially play at a Rugby World Cup. And I had to weigh that choice up on whether I would go home, because if you leave the country for too long, then your eligibility laws reset. So I sort of took a bit of a gamble and stayed around. Obviously then it was all kept getting worse and worse. The next minute it's $3,000 to get into New Zealand, and you can't get MIQ. So I actually still haven't been home. So it's been a long time. But for me, it was definitely a big learning process. I think it was the first time in my whole life I'd never had competitive sport ever. I think it was probably the same for a lot of people. And as a result, I guess you ended up doing quite a lot of soul searching, because there was nothing, you couldn't go and do anything. You guys know what it was like. It was crazy. And Washington was particularly strict. I ended up, I bought a car racing seat and a steering wheel and started online sim racing to keep some competition flowing in my life. And that actually helped a lot, kept me busy. So unfortunately, I'm not Lewis Hamilton, but I put my best foot forward. And then we were lucky to get some rugby in the later half of the year, which was real exciting. And fun trip to Bermuda with those guys and get the legs pumping again. But apart from that, it was a tough year. It was a hard year to train and do anything in general. And I think, personally, I look back and after my last season, I'm just was like, man, needed to think of more ways outside the box to stay conditioned and in a situation like that, because I guess that was probably one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, it was weird. There was a lot of players that went through. They got a taste of retirement, right? Like you said, competitive sport was gone, and some players this is actually quite nice, and they never came back. And they said, I'm okay with this. Others freaked out. And they're like, I'm not ready to retire, hang it up. And they came back when they'd said they were done. Everyone's looking at Shalom again here, just won't retire. But you come through it. Let's talk 2021. It was a mixed year for you guys. And again, the injury bug struck up there. For yourself in particular, you've come off Player of the Year 2019, abbreviated season 2020. You're chomping at the bit 2021 to get Seattle back, to where their fans want them in the playoffs and a top team. And then the injury bug just strikes you down. How was that and dealing with that throughout the year?
Mate, it was real challenging. Obviously, on a personal front, it started real early. And as you just alluded to, obviously come in with huge expectations and goals for the season. Trying to put 2020 out of our head and build on what we'd been doing in 2019. And the small taste of 2020 that we had and just add to it. I was hurt before the season even started, which was just tough. And a lot of guys fell over again really early in the season and got us off to a challenging start. There's changes in coaching staff, changes in the management staff throughout the season. But, as you said, by the end of the season with Clarkey on board, some things moved around. It was really we finished really strongly. And I think, if you look back on a season like that, you've got to find the positives and review negatives. So, that's what the team's done. That's what we've all done as players. And, I think we learned a lot. And as anyone that watched the league saw, the league came a long way in 2021. A lot of new teams looking really good. That gone is the day where a new team comes in and struggles in a professional sports league. I think we're young enough that teams are coming in from day one expecting to win matches, and as you saw with LA in the end there. But the teams, anyone you played, you knew you're going to be in for a fight, and I think that's the biggest thing that's changed around the league is, everyone was normally pretty physical, but, now there's physical, niggly, and they're playing expansive rugby on top of that. So, 2021 was a tough year for us, but as I said, there were injuries. Injuries are unavoidable in a contact sport. We all know that. So you got to kind of hold your breath, cross the fingers that they don't strike all at the same time like they had been. But it was. The boys are excited for this year. Let's put it that way. We've had a great preseason. One more game to go, and then we're into it. She's all right on top of our heads all of a sudden.
Yeah, it was quick. How about poor old Ross Neal? You talk about injuries in a contact sport. Non-contact sports, he gets injured as well. So tough run there for the big Englishman. Hopefully he gets back and firing fit this year, huh? Big Ross.
Oh, good. Funnily enough, he's just had his nose straightened out.
Yeah. That's just from experience, the dumbest thing you can do while you're still playing. Never get, it's almost a bullseye to get it broken again within 6 weeks of getting it straightened. So I hope, fingers crossed for Ross, that he doesn't break his nose again. But yeah.
Hey, look at the state of this thing, mate. I'm not getting that fixed in a hurry.
Yeah, I don't know. It looks like one of those windy South New Zealand roads there. A little bit to the left, a little to the right. And
just single lane down each side. Make sure you watch where you're going.
All right, give me three players to watch for not named Rad Tucker for Seattle this year. Seawolves fans, who should they be watching this year? Get me excited, Bradley.
Well, we got some exciting new names, so I'm going to go no further. We got Duncan Matthews coming in from South Africa, fullback. Played on the weekend, looked sharp. We've got Lopetti in the midfield. Made his Eagles debut.
Looks like a winner, that kid. Yep.
He's a class human all round, hard worker, and I think he's got a lot of elements to his game that people should get excited about, especially how young he is. Runs hard. He's got great feet. You can't ask for much more from a midfielder than that. suppose I should chuck a forward in there. I'll chuck my old mate. I'll say obviously he's a bit of an easy one, but Big Rick's looking real good. Scored a great try in the game on the weekend. I think he was meant to just be setting us up for a kick and sold a thumb in away. He went 80 metres galloping down the track as he does. But he's had a big off season. I think, he got a taste of Eagles rugby last year. It's always a tough season for a guy, you're leading the team that's not going so well. But I think, it's grown him as a captain and as a player as well. And look, I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do this year. I think he's going to have another big season and really lead from the front.
How's his English? Is starting to use the lockdown to brush up on that a bit?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think sometimes he just puts his accent on a bit stronger on purpose. He's been living here for ages, so he's married, or he's engaged at least. And Kristen speaks great English. So Big Rick, I think, just puts it on because all the South African boys are at training. give us your best Rickett Hadding impersonation. Oh, there's one. You better not seen this, Tim.
He doesn't know. He doesn't know how to log into the rugby network. You're safe.
Oh yeah. No, he loves coming up to a line out, and obviously everyone's listening for the calls, but Ricky has this thing where if he's going to call something a little bit complicated, he's like, listen, and he always just gives you a big loud listen, like a little bit like that. I can't do him any justice. That was pretty good. Yeah, well, that's pretty much how he talks. We love winding him up about that because he says it all the time without noticing.
It's his little tick.
Yeah, I think he's normally talking to me. I don't know why, but probably off with the fairies.
Yeah, that's where we're going now, buddy. We're going off with the fairies because we've got to wrap it up. I could do this for 4 hours, right. But I miss you.
I always miss you, buddy.
We're still recording, just so you know. But
make sure if you're going to get Will on that, you just surprise him with me popping up to throw some curveballs at him.
Yeah, we can do that. I think like the Battle of the Brothers. Maybe we'll look at that when you guys play New York.
That sounds good.
Yeah, we'll get to the bottom. Actually, we should get your mum on that week as well. Get the real.
No, you don't want to hear it. The amount of be nice to your brother texts that I'll get that week will just be ridiculous.
Is this the first time you guys have played each other?
It is for Will and I. I've played with Will when he just came into. We both played a bit of club rugby together, and then James and I have played each other in Mitre 10 a number of times. And the week leading up to it's just pain with mum and dad. They constantly draw back to this one time when Damien McKenzie played Marty, and they had a big spat all day. They were going at each other, and mum and dad are just like, don't be like that all week, and it just never stops. But I think we both got caught on camera being grubby to each other a couple of times. I just remember coming on, he started and I came off the bench against him in the first ruck. I just got welcome to the show from an elbow from him, and then one of my uncles recorded me the old classic push his face in the dirt, but I got caught on camera, so classic.
Have you ever seen the Brett and Josh Morris one where they have the play fight and referee sprints in thinking they're having a for real fist fight? Maybe
see, that's probably more me and Will. That might be me and Will. We get on a bit better. I was always trying to defend Will from James, so we'll probably be all right.
James is the nemesis. We'll get him over eventually, 2 or 3 if you'll be in the league. The Suniula is 2.0.
He's the niggly middle child, just he's the negative one, always miserable and likes causing crap.
I'm the middle child. Well, you've got me red too. All right, Bradley. No more insults. Excited, mate. 2022, you're going to get back. You're going to be fit. You're going to be in great form. One of the top players in the league. It's always been a pleasure to watch you, buddy, and hang out with you. Excited to see that growth, and hopefully USA Eagles call up not too far away for you as well in the future.
Yeah, hopefully, mate. Keep the head down. Appreciate it. Appreciate you guys. Keep it up.
Thank you, Rad Tucker. And Pete, firstly, let me just thank you for stepping aside and letting me handle that interview. True friend. You're like, you know what? I'm probably not going to get a word in anyway. I'll say
I did not want to get in between you and Brad. I was very happy to hand that one off. But I think, one of the interesting things, you talked about being at the final and hanging out with Bill Gorin. I got a chance to hang out with Rad Tucker at the final last year, and it's such a good guy, such a smart guy. He's going to do. He's a great player, but I think he's gonna have an impact on this game. I think after he stopped playing, that might be even bigger than his impact as a player. But I love the fact, put down roots in Seattle. A real heart, one of the many people they actually have on that team that you could say is like the heartbeat of the team. But when he's not playing for them, you saw it a little bit last year. When he's not playing, obviously an injury-filled season. When he's not playing, that team isn't quite the same.
They do lose a little bit, and we had him on the show before the championship game last year, and he just has a great infectious personality. And I think he's going to, like you said, whether it's coaching or whether it's in the media, hopefully he sticks around MLR for a long time, because it's imports like Brad that are actually going to help build the game and the brand of Major League Rugby here. And boy, I just love. I can't wait for his brother and him to play in May. We're going to try to get the whole Tucker family on the show the week leading up to that, and see if we can, get rattle some of those skeletons in the closet.
Am I allowed, or is Brad going to take my spot and you're going to bring his brother on? I'm not sure that I'm going to be allowed if it's the three of us.
It'll be tight. It'll be like the opening to the Brady Bunch, right? All the panels, it's three sons, three daughters, you and me.
I think we'll have to get his, is it James, the Super Rugby player on? And
the middle brother. Parents. Yeah, mum and dad. Yeah. No,
we just jump on one of their Zoom calls, like one of their Zoom catch-up call, family calls. We'll just Zoom crash it.
Yeah, it's just typical, dysfunctional three boys. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? It's going to be great. All right. Speaking of things going wrong, if they go wrong at this part of the game, you're going to be in trouble. It's the transition. Something's gone wrong. There's a turnover, kick downfield. It's the confusing part of the game, right? It's when we get the clarity in American football of a line of scrimmage, boom, separation. Rugby sometimes can be a mess. Transition, more so than other. You're watching your team, they've got the ball, all of a sudden they don't have it. Pete, define the transition first for us. Give us a simple explanation.
Well, you do a great job of using American sports analogies, and I think the transition is most similar to that in basketball. Right. So in basketball, when there's a turnover, there's a moment when the defense isn't set, and you want to maximize that moment. And that's what's true here. So there's lots of different kinds of transitions, but a transition fundamentally is when the possession changes. And when the possession changes, the attack that had the ball, right, they now have to be on defense, but their defensive structure isn't in place. So that means the team that has turned the ball over and now has an opportunity. And, there's often some people talk about 3 seconds, 4 seconds. There's an amount of time that you have which you want to use before the defense builds structure. And Dan, if you remember, we talked about structure and defense. Defense lives on structure. Attack doesn't need that. And so when that ball is turned over, when you've got that ball, you've got 3, 4, 5 seconds where you need to find the space, find where the defense doesn't have their structure built, and you need to attack it.
All right. MLR, who's the best transition team? I'm a new fan. I don't have a team. Who should I be watching at the transition? Who does it best?
Well, I think one transition is the kick, right? That is a change of possession. Now, it's a deliberate change of possession, right? And so you'll say, we're going to give the ball away when we kick because we're going to gain territory. And probably the team that would be the scariest team to kick to, and I think they're also very good in transition on turnover. So when the attack loses one contact, knocks it on, drops it, all of those are different opportunities of transitions. And that is the Utah Warriors. Because what they have is they have some of the outside backs, so the wings and fullbacks like Mikey Teo, who are very instinctive. They don't need structure. They don't need, a place where they know what to do and everyone knows what to do the same thing. You need intuitive and instinctive players. And I think the Utah Warriors do that very well. I will say that probably in turnover from a tackle or a ruck, or when the ball's lost in contact, I think the San Diego have traditionally been one of the best in that in the turnovers. And that's because Joe Peterson, who is their fly half, is also a very instinctive player. So what you want is when that turnover happens is you want to move the ball quickly into someone that can see, can recognize space and attack it. And I think Joe Peterson does that.
Let's take the kicking part out of it. I want to talk to you more about the transition at a turnover, whether it be a breakdown steal or a knock on. What would be some advice you'd give to a young player in terms of what are you looking for to attack off a transition?
Yeah, and a pretty good rule of thumb is move the ball twice, right? So the rule of thumb is that when you get the ball, if you're not sure what to do, pass it twice, because at that point where the ball is lost, there will be a lot of defenders, right? So let's say, Dan, a ruck happens and there's a turnover at the ruck. Around the ruck are a lot of the people that were trying to win the ball, and now they're standing there. So the rule of thumb is move the ball twice, and once you've passed that ball twice, you actually have an opportunity to make a decision. So on attack, it's about moving the ball twice. On defense, it's about what we call connection. So what you want to do is you're not set up. You just want to build connections with the teammates around you, because when you get 3 defenders together that are connected, they can defend most things in rugby, right? And being connected means being aligned in the same place, like connected verbally, close enough to each other that there's no space between you for anyone to run, and then moving in the same direction. And so it's all about getting connected on defense. It's all about moving the ball on attack.
So if I'm an attacking player, I'm looking for a disconnection or a mismatch in the defensive line,
right.
A player's out of position.
Man, that's really, have you played this game? Because that's exactly right? So and this is true not just in transition, you're always looking for places where the defense is weak, right? And so where the defense is disconnected, or where there's no defenders, that's where you want to go. I will say, Dan, one of the challenges on attack when the ball is transitioned is that the attack doesn't have structure. Now, they don't need as much structure, but if a tackle happens, you need support around you. You need players to come in and help you win that ball. So there is some risk on the attack that if you don't make the right decision and you don't go where the defense is disconnected, that you might end up turning that ball over again.
Now, you were very complimentary, and rightfully so, of Utah. I felt that one of the best transition players was Matt Turner through the first 3-4 years of Major League Rugby. So if you want to go back and watch some old games, we had Rad Tucker on tonight, his teammate Matt Turner, not a really strong kicker. So whenever there was a turnover, I would always be quick calling games to find where Turner was, and he would do a great job of counting heads, both sides of where the turnover was. He'd look to see if there's a fullback and wings had dropped quickly. If they hadn't, then he would call a kick in, or he would run. And he was very elusive, difficult. And that's where those players seem to thrive, is in transition. Those elusive players.
And we've already talked about the sevens players, right, that are coming into the league. And Matt Turner played sevens for England. Sevens players do really well in transition on attack because they're used to having a lot of space, and they're used to having looking up and exactly what you said, Dan. They're used to looking up, trying to find that space, and then attacking that space. So when you look at someone like Martin Yosefo in Seattle, that's someone who can add to the transition attack that Seattle has. So
looking to this season, is this something where you think Tom Mitchell for LA will thrive in that very good LA where they've always been a very skillful, obviously well-rounded team? Now you bring in a circuit breaker style player like Tom Mitchell, who, no offense to Matt Turner, is a little younger, has a lot more hair, and probably has a little bit more spring in the step as well. Is he going to be a guy who's going to thrive on that transition?
So I think so, because I think one of the things that, we talked about moving the ball twice. So when you've got a player like Matt Giddo who reads the game so well, and he's one of those players that seems to have time, the turnover happens, you get the Giddo's hands, and someone like Tom Mitchell that can recognize space is just going to run to the space, and Giddo's got the skills to get in there. So that's a great call out, Dan. I think we see with Giddo and Mitchell like a pairing that can really take those transitions and turn them into game breakers.
Yeah, fun. They were fun to watch last year, and I think they've added some more weapons this year in Ben Lesage and now Tom Mitchell as well. So look out. DeMonte Noble, talk about a great transition player.
Yeah, I mean, again, people that can play in space, some is so hard to defend one-on-one, and that's one of the reasons why in transition you want to be connected, because you don't want to have those one-on-one tackles. And you know, Dante's just like, he is so hard to tackle. If there isn't a connection, he's going to make the break. I mean, you know, did LA get better even though they lost Adam Ashley Cooper? I mean, I know we're not doing the deep dive, Strobro, but maybe.
Yeah, potentially, you could be right. Well, there it is. Everything you need to know on the transition. You want to tie it up in a package, or we feel good here? I'll put a bow on it, Dan. Like, you can't ask me to talk and not have me talk. I think the transition is one of the hardest things to do, and it's something that has been getting better at MLR throughout the year. So I think transitions have become more important. I'm sure it's part of the game. I mean, I would argue, you know, if we want to talk about young players, coaches, like, what happens when the ball drops in a drill down for the coach? The coach blows the whistle, right? But if you want to practice transitions, when the ball drops, don't blow the whistle, right? You want to give lots of opportunities. So I think transitions are going to be more cool. As deep, better in the league, which they have, then these transition moments will be more important for scoring. And therefore, the teams that are good at transitions, both attack and defense, I think we'll see coming up to the top of the competition ladder. You remind me of the old DJ Alligator song. Be careful, parents, so there is an explicit version, so make sure you do the edited version. But what a great song that was. All right, that one wraps it up. But guess what? Guess what, Pete? Super Brew Pick'em is back. Gorgeous Dan. I didn't win it, but I was the best in this group. The professor. I mean,
I can't do any worse, right? I think I was down with the people that weren't playing anymore. like the people that just weren't for doing picks. That's where I was. I was making picks, and I was down with the people that weren't doing any picks.
I know. We have to get the new addition, Ryan Ginty, involved. He needs a creative nickname, so that can be everyone's job this week, is to get us for a Ginty nickname that he can put on to our Super Brew pool. But that's back up and live. We'll make sure we get a link out or a way to sign up for that. We had good numbers last year. We'll try to build on it again this year. And make sure you hit up the chat box in there. The banter's always pretty good. I'll be pretty responsive in getting back to you unless you beat me and I'm losing. I'm talking to you, Scary Larry, you genius. You're going to get me again this year with all those algorithms. Pete, been a good one. Appreciate it as always. Get some sleep there in the Windy City. Again, thanks to our guests tonight, George Killebrew and Rad Tucker and the Seattle Seawolves for letting us borrow Brad there. I know season preps are getting pretty tight and getting pretty close, so thanks to Carly and Clarkey up there for letting us borrow Brad for a little bit. That wraps it up. For the Professor, Pete Steinberg, Aaron Castro, Brian Ginty, I'm Dan Power. This has been the MLR Kickoff.